Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, how dare you, then be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you'd like to support this channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live. There's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. If you'd like to join the community debate, then go to nathanoakley.com and check out the Flat Earth Debate forum, which I strongly advise you all join. Most importantly, if you'd like to join this discussion right here, right now, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the shape of the Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show. And one last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now, we are joined by Ranty Flat Earth, 10th Man, Chocolate Sayin, Paul, and I think that's pretty much it. Hopefully we've got a few people in Discord as well. Very good to have you all.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, hello, hello.
Shout out to Del
Good
West
morning.
Watson. How you doing, Del West Watson, who says, oi, oi. Thank you very much indeed for the super chat. Thank you very much. Any signs of Earth curvature?
None at all.
All over the place, Nathan.
Tell me more. All over the place. I would expect that to be the case on a sphere. What do you mean?
Well, it's all over the place. I mean, some guy went to court to tell the courts that, and they laughed at him. Throughout his case, Nathan. Even though it's supposed to be everywhere.
Talking about Zen Garcia, which we discussed in the pre-show, right?
Yeah.
Hey, Owen.
Hey, good afternoon.
Very good to have you. Any signs of axial rotation?
No.
Axes rotating, unfortunately. Stars in the sky. Can't tell you whether it's the Earth moving or the stars.
The stars.
I'm pretty sure
No,
it's
the
not
floor
here.
is not moving.
It's the
It's
stars.
just nonsense.
Agreed. Do you have something to add to that, Owen?
I'm pretty sure that, yeah, whatever's up there, if they move, that's perfectly fine because we have no confirmation that it's physical. The Earth, however, being physical, would have a lot of palpable consequences that would naturally derive from it.
Yes.
And we don't sense that at all.
Speed changes. Shout out to Ute. Any evidence or scientific evidence of gravity?
Scientific evidence of what?
Gravity.
Scientific evidence of what?
Gravity.
No,
Scientific evidence thereof?
no, just a vast presuppositional structure, a conceptualized mechanical structure that is very efficient, yet lacks any physical proof. It's purely, yeah, conceptual.
Imaginary. It's called imagination, Arwen.
No, it's conceptual mechanics. It just like math and philosophy, it falls in those regions. Conceptual mechanics.
Right. As in force of the floor, that doesn't exist. That part. The force
So
part.
Nathan,
Right.
so Nathan,
No. The force is there. It's just not gravity. There's other ways to explain it that do anchor it in actual scientific proof.
Which is why the question is there any signs of gravity?
Right.
So
So that would
Nathan,
be a no.
Nope.
Let 10th man know when you're done, guys.
There we go.
Let 10th man know when you're done.
Good. I'm sorry, brother.
no, that's all right. To have scientific evidence be proven, you would have to have a dependent, independent variable, control variable. You have to wiggle it. You have to mess with it just to manipulate it to see what's the cause for the effect. Correct, everybody?
Yeah.
So when George Musser says gravity is not a force, but you can think of it as a force, and then he calls it magic, and he says it's a non-force, pretending to be a force in reality. How does the scientific method wiggle a non-force?
It doesn't. So when they claim that it's the bending of a conceptual medium known as space-time, then you're not going to be able to vary and manipulate a conceptual medium that apparently gives rise to a non-force that you can think of as a force. It's just doublespeak nonsense and fantasy. It's akin to what was told to Luke Skywalker.
Right.
The other thing is
So when the ballers say we can prove gravity, whether it's Newtonian gravity or Einsteinian gravity, well, Musser says there is no force in Newtonian, so that's out. Now they say it's the bending of time-space. Well, you can't wiggle it or mess with it, so that's out. So it's all made up.
Yeah, pseudoscience, essentially. They're not actually basing it on any empirical evidence. They're simply asserting it. It's a just so story. Very interesting that they can make up this medium and then start bending it and causing a non-force force that gives rise to a force you can think of as a force.
So will they ever admit that the scientific method cannot be used to prove it?
Well, George Musa certainly knows that. He made it very plain. The cause? Oh, no, we don't know the cause. Well,
actually, Paul Voigt. We have a citation from Paul Voigt doing that.
No, I mean,
You played it before, Nathan.
Yeah. What Paul Voigt's saying is science doesn't prove things, which is just fundamentally incorrect. What he actually means is, like Mr. Moose's statements, they prove nothing. But they're not science. It's just the words of a fundamentalist zealot who believes he lives on a sphere, telling the world about his religious beliefs in stuff he has constructed based on the mathematics of Einstein. Not the actual world we live in. That would be dealt exclusively with by actual science. You know, a study of the physical and natural world, natural science. That's what we're interested in here on Flat Earth Debate. Would you not all agree? We're all interested in the physical and natural world, as opposed to mathematics that they derive conceptual mediums and then bend according to them.
So what he's basically doing is mistakenly calling it science. What he actually should be saying is pseudoscience doesn't prove anything.
That's correct. Absolutely. So when he says science, he doesn't mean science. Science absolutely proves things. It proves or disproves your hypothesis. It establishes a cause of an effect, or it validates your null. In other words, does not confirm that you have a valid cause of an effect. So it's an empirical method used for a very long period of time to establish cause, to discover the cause of a natural phenomena, not reify a mathematical formula into something we can never see, taste, touch, or experience in any way, shape, or form. They just tell us that it's there, a conceptual medium that they have invented mathematically. It's an utter load of nonsense.
There's a secondary point that follows on from Musa. When Musa says gravity is not a force, but you can think of it as a force, well, what's causing tides? Because we're told that it's the moon, right? If the moon doesn't have a magical force between the Earth and it, because Musa said so, then that by definition means that the moon cannot be causing the tides. There is no gravitational attraction. It means that something else has to be causing the tides. What that is, who knows? Who cares? But it's not the moon doing it, right?
That's a good point, because technically with the Einsteinian concept, it's now the bending of space-time, and it just seems to be set in a certain way. So how does that set certain way actually then cause the mass-to-mass attracting from the moon to the Earth? It's really not explained that well if you start to think about it critically.
Well, one lie.
Even George himself kind of made fun of that concept in the interview. Just to kind of paraphrase, I mean, he was kind of like the mere aspect of a force reaching from one body to another body was just preposterous.
Yep, and also
and even Newton thought that. So,
but also think about it like this: if you would start to accept the presupposition of a space-time bending, right, that causes this one-way directional apparent force, that can only work one way. look, if you conceptualize mass attracting mass, then there is like two-way effects, basically, if you have two objects. But with the bending of space-time, that's technically impossible.
Look,
It
they've
can only
lied.
go one way. There cannot be two bendings of space-time crossing one another. That's can't work. It
They've
would
lied about the painting. The canvas is the lie. Now we're going to each little drawing and brush stroke and saying, well, that's a lie now. And oh, that's a lie now. Well, the whole canvas is a lie. So the whole painting is a lie.
I'm going to take that as a pause to move on with housekeeping. Any evidence of a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth?
No.
No.
Sounds like a lot of word salad to me, Nathan.
Sounds like a lot of what, Ranty?
Word salad to me.
It is a load of word salad. Self-explanatory, though. Obviously, you've got a presupposed spherical Earth in that statement. Well, you'd need to prove out that presupposition before we start identifying molten iron cores at the centre of that presupposition, let's be honest. Any evidence of the R value, the presupposition itself?
No.
Nope.
Last but by no means least, any evidence that you can have gas pressure without the necessary antecedent of a container to press upon, for all the fundamentalist religious zealots who believe the sky is a vacuum known as outer space.
This is the one that puts me the most about the current state of play. There's an outstanding issue on the table with conspiracy cats, and it has been for about 12 months, and the ballers just ignore it. It's like, why aren't the ballers getting conspiracy cats to at least present the evidence that supports the assertion that you can have gas pressure within a vacuum without some kind of membrane? Ballers are not doing it, and I don't understand why. It's a legitimate on-topic disagreement about the evidence to prove the point. Where is that evidence? Conspiracy Cats has got it pinned on him. Ballers are ignoring it and coming up with explanations or whatever, logical or reasonable explanations. But the fact that it does it, the fact that if you didn't have the balloon, and it, like he says, without the balloon, there is no pressure. Well, the fact that that gas pressure goes into the vacuum and disperses immediately and fills the available volume, the fact that it does that is the same reason why when you have a density disequilibrium, you've got a differential between two mediums. It's the same reason why the movement happens. So when people are asking me, well, why is the movement happening? It's the same reason for why gas pressure goes to vacuum. There's a pressure disequilibrium there, and it will just equalize immediately. But people don't question it when it comes to the gas exploding into the vacuum of space, because they understand that's what will happen. But when it comes to the little cherry tomato in the density tower and that moving all by itself, if we manipulate the medium, well, what makes it move? The same thing that makes the gas pressure burst off into space. Just the way it is.
Anthony, let's try to understand what you're saying. So let's just clear up. Are you? Is this an experiment? What you're saying? What you're showing? Yeah.
No, I'm saying that conspiracy cats has pinned on him to explain or prove the evidence that allows us to have gas pressure next to a vacuum without some kind of membrane.
Let me see if I could.
No, he can't demonstrate.
How can we demonstrate?
Hold on, go on, Spears.
No, I absolutely agree. You know, you got conspiracy cats promoting this idea, but not demonstrating it. So, you know, it's like, well, what more do we do? What more can we do? You know, we're showing experiments, tests, or whatever's necessary.
Like Thompson and Zen Garcia did. That's the only way it's going to get addressed. Prove that you can have gas pressure without a container of some kind.
Well, I mean, again, they say force. There's a force, an imaginary force, but nonetheless, they say a force. Yeah, even though it's not a force, they say that's what's holding. So I think the only way to show them,
that just means they have two things to prove that they have no proof.
Just everyone likes cutting off Spurs. The only way to show them. Go ahead, Spurs.
No, I will say things where probably that you disagree, but I know, like Anthony, to show conspiracy cats, what they want to see is mass not attracting mass. You see, So something like Cavendish in a vacuum, for me, the balls wouldn't move. You wouldn't see this attraction. There's no cause. There's no reason.
For God's sake. Suppose we covered this yesterday for about 2 hours.
Thank you.
No. I'm saying to satisfy them, not
Who cares
us,
what
not
they want?
us.
Right, you're talking about what
Why do you want to
fundamental...
keep jacking off the ballers, Spursky?
Hold on. Don't slag him off for...
Getting really fetishized.
Right. They are fundamentalist zealots. What they want to satisfy their religious zealotry is inconsequential. In order for it to satisfy a causal relationship scientifically, it would first need to have an observed phenomena. So you started off, Spurs, by saying they need to be satisfied that mass doesn't attract mass. Let me just say this and make it absolutely clear. Mass doesn't attract mass. Now, if it did, when I asked you yesterday to take me to the step 1 phenomena of mass attracting mass, you'd have shown it me. But you didn't. You showed me the balls. A man-made device. Now you want to put that man-made device in a vacuum chamber. Hold on. Now you want to put that man-made device in a vacuum chamber to satisfy the requirements of religious fundamentalist zealots. So, Spurs, you're never going to satisfy them because they want to believe that mass attracts mass, something you can never demonstrate ever in nature. So step 1 undoes this assertion. But if you keep letting them take you to step 3 claiming it's an experiment when it's not, you're always going to lose. No matter what parameters you put on it, like a vacuum chamber, while they beg the question of gravity, because they're automatically assuming it once they've got their little quote-unquote experiment, which it isn't. Mass doesn't attract mass ever, Spurs. Take me to that, then we can go and figure out why it happens. But we don't see cars levitating, and we do not see mass attracting mass. If we do, show it me.
Spurs, the other thing is, I listened yesterday to this conversation that you had back and forth, and about when you were asking about who's responsible, who makes that decision. Anybody that applies scientific method makes that decision, right? Anybody that doesn't apply scientific method can't. That's the reason why we have scientific method. But let's just say, for shits and giggles, because I like to beg the question. Nathan hates it, and so Nathan's going to get pissed off with me now when I say this. But just bear with me, Spurs. When they say mass attracts mass, you say to them, okay, well, how are you going to prove what's causing it? Now, don't forget that whether or not you accept the 50 millionth to one thing or not, who cares what the view is? It says in his own experiment that the chances of destroying the success of the experiment is quite high because you only need a little tiny force to ruin it all, or words to that effect. This is because they don't manipulate the thing that they claim is causing this mass attracting mass, which is gravity. They're not able to prove that this thing that's causing the mass attracting mass is actually gravity, because by his own volition, it only takes a very minute disruptive force to destroy the successes of the experiment. And because he didn't manipulate the gravity to prove that it was causing the thing that he believes he's seeing, it's more likely on a balance of probabilities that something else was causing it that he wasn't controlled. Let's be honest, it only takes somebody farting in the next room to create a turbulent air effect. And that could be enough to be, I'm not saying it is, but I'm just spitballing ideas for what might cause what he thinks is what he thinks. That's why you've got to manipulate it. It's no different to the rooster crowing and thinking that that's causing sunrise. But when you blow its head off, the sun still rises, because it might be the case that you actually, if gravity did exist, you might manipulate gravity to prove that it was the cause in his experiment and it didn't do anything.
So shout out to Paraplegic Bear, Vinny Ballsack. Join the live show. Pseudoscience Cavendish Ball Lover. Enlighten us, Miss Know-It-All. Thank you very much for the super chat, Paraplegic Bear. Also shout out to Retro Bill, who says, looking forward to Spurs Gimo's new ASMR channel for ballers. Thank you very much indeed for the super chat, Retro Bill.
Right. So to summarize what Riley said very quickly, it's pretty much impossible to isolate your independent variable within the pseudoscience setup.
Right.
But to summarize, Riley, he's saying there's something that could exist that's within the medium.
No. Let's clear that up. No, he gave a disclosure at the beginning. I shut up because he gave that disclaimer. He's begging the question. He's automatically assuming there is a force of gravity. That's the problem. But he disclaimed that.
But Nathan, we're going to have to go. Nathan, sorry, we're going to have to go in order to show the ball earthers there is no gravity. We have to go
We've
there.
already
We have to
shown
show.
it.
We have to show Cavendish not working in a vacuum. Because listen, I said to Bob, there are no demonstrations of Cavendish in a vacuum, and he thought that was interesting because he would have thought that Cavendish in a vacuum would have been shown, everywhere, and this hasn't been found by anybody. Fight the Flat Earth, Rhetoric, all the usual crew. They've searched far and wide, and all they can come up with is a paper. Someone's produced a paper to say it's in a vacuum, but we haven't actually seen this. Now, like Anthony's saying, I know you don't like begging the question because it's like giving them something to play with, to talk about. But what I would like to know, this is why I push it. I would like to see, their answer, look in their faces, whatever it is. If they were to see Cavendish in a vacuum with no force, if they didn't move, what then? What would they say? Because I don't think we've reached that question or reached that point yet. Because we
They're
haven't
always
seen
going to
it.
say the same thing, that it's insignificant. Oh, it just didn't happen to work. The problem is they can't really isolate their independent variable, and therefore, they can claim, but it works sometimes. That's not a valid thing for an experiment.
Spurs, the problem is, if you claim anything to do with the vacuum chamber, right, what you're kind of doing is giving yourself the burden of trying to prove that the Cavendish experiment works in a vacuum or doesn't work in a vacuum chamber. And if you think about it, how do you move the weights towards the other weights to make them try and react to it if you're outside, because you can't go in there because we don't exist inside a vacuum chamber? You're not going to be able to
Not
do
my
it.
problem. That's not my problem. That's not my problem. That the ball earthers need to produce.
Gosh.
In order, they would need to produce a vacuum, a Cavendish in a vacuum to see it working in order to prove this force. Otherwise, they have no force. They
there
don't
is
have
no
anything
force.
right
Prove
they
what
have
force.
something.
There is no force, Spurs. These people who are hanging on to this
They already
old,
have no
outdated
force.
rhetoric don't have
You're
a
missing
force.
that. First, they already don't have a force.
I know, but see the problem with that though, if we just say there is no force, this falls on deaf ears. This just tells the ball earther, you don't know what you're talking. Not you, not anyone here. I just mean when someone just says no force, your gurus say there's no
you're
force.
wrong. You're wrong. It's not the ball earthers.
They kind of that falls on deaf ears, and what they want, which is weird. They want
Just
practical
let me know.
demonstration.
You're saying the ball earthers, it's the trolls. It's the same trolls you're talking to. It's the deaf ears they're falling on. Most normal human beings would see what we're talking about. These guys don't. You're appealing to the trolls that are never going to back down. Ever.
Possibly. But I mean, look, I have close friends and people. They are hardcore ball earthers. They're not trolls. They are just so indoctrinated that they just can't believe we've been lied to. So it's not. I understand that these people are like that, and it just seems they must be trolling. But in their minds, well, why would they lie to us? I don't see any reason. This is how they've seen it. So
That's they definitely can conceive why they're being lied to. They just refuse to believe it. It's not like they can't
see it, Arwin. They can't see it. They don't understand. It's like
they can see it. They just refuse to see it.
Just let me know when I could talk. Oh, finally an opening. First, you're in love with your last name, chemo. You want to offer chemotherapy to corpses. There is no gravity. Their own science says there is no gravity. There is no force. Their own astrophysicist says there is no force. They are dead. They lost the argument. You come in and apply first aid to a dead person, you look crazy.
Hello, Adam.
Afternoon, everybody.
Can you just enlighten us on something? I know you've only just arrived. I was just thinking about you.
Oh.
So, according to somebody in the chat, whose name will go unmentioned, that you can recreate this Cavendish experiment. I just wondered what your experience was with it when you were, training up?
I've done it. We did it I did A-level physics for the first year and then quit and changed it to psychology because it was just getting to nonsense. But we did it in part of the first year basic experiments, and they're not, obviously we didn't have a shed, but they're the same piece of equipment that you see that guy on 60 Symbols, the Nottingham University one, where he's saying the lab tech was so frustrated he cut it in half. So it was those ones we used. It didn't work, and I've commented on our own before saying that I always remember the teacher saying, "Yeah, don't worry, lads, that one never works." So
very interesting. Hey, Chris, how you doing?
Hey, Nathan, good. Talking about Cavendish?
We are. Perfect timing. What was your experience, Chris?
No mass attracting mass, that's for sure. There's a guy named B.M. Furball who right now has put together a series of videos documenting his Cavendish test. And if you go and look at what all he's had to do to counteract every variable, it's insane. So he has the most elaborate Cavendish setup I've ever seen. And even now, he's even after everything he's done, he's not fully ready to do the test. Like, he's got it in a windowed, I don't know if it's glass or plastic, but a windowed box. He's got holes in the box with strings coming through it. He has little pieces of paper hanging down to make sure there's no change in air currents. He's got remote controlled battery powered arms to move the weights into place. Like, it's insane. And he's still not able to to do it yet because there's just too many variables to take into account. So when some dummy like myself goes into their garage and sets up Cavendish and does it right, but just says, okay, let's see what happens, there's too many variables to keep track of. There's absolutely no way that Cavendish is either made up, or if he did it, he lied and he just used some other math to come up with his numbers. I'm not sure, but there's no way that he put his apparatus in a shed in a box with a hole where he looked through his telescope, and that's exactly the story if you go read it. It's nuts.
It's a load of old bollocks. It just begs the question. It's taking step 3 experiment before you even formulate a hypothesis and before you observe the actual phenomena you're claiming, which is mass attracting mass. Well, as I keep saying, there's not a phenomena that you're going to take me to where that happens.
Yeah, and I have to be honest. I mean, I've been listening to the conversations with you and Spurs Chemo yesterday, at least, and it's the discussions you've had that I've been a part of in the last, I don't know how long I've been coming here, but at least a year, maybe longer. And the ideas that you and others like John present about, okay, is it mass attracting a mass, or is it because it's made to move very easily? Like, literally walking by the apparatus can cause it to move. Okay, so it's made by man to move easily, right? So what is the cause? Well, the cause could be wind. It could be motion of the ground. It could be magnetism. Could be electrostatics, right? So in other words, if something is causing it to move.
Stop. Sorry, you're now begging the question. So you're saying, well, what's the effect?
Absolutely.
Well, the effect is what you've conjured. In other words, what you're trying to explain is why do the balls do what they do? But they wouldn't be doing that if you hadn't strung them up in the way you'd strung them up. So you're trying to explain an effect that you've created yourself. So it's a man-made effect because balls don't attract each other in nature. So it's sort of whistling past the graveyard when you get straight onto explaining the effect that a man has created in this apparatus. Because you're not observing an effect and trying to figure out what's caused it and then have developed apparatus to establish that, and the apparatus is used to isolate the variables. That's not what's happening. They're straight into, here's these balls going towards each other, why does that happen? You're like, hold on, what about all the stuff where you put it together to do that? Well, no, we'll just ignore that. There's an effect happening. Well, no, if we're doing a study of the natural world, we want to know where it happens in nature. Let's see what happened in nature. Oh, it doesn't. It happens in these balls only. Well, then it only happens in these balls, and you've made them to do that. So we don't need to explain anything. You've just conjured up an effect. Man-made effect. What is the effect? Well, the balls going towards each other. Because that certainly is an effect we observe. I don't observe that.
This is what we're trying to find out, if it's because, as I said, Bob says the Earth has a huge mass, or describes it as a huge mass, and things, again, this is not how I'm seeing, this is what the argument is, that things are attracted to this huge mass. Now, again, for me, if this were, a real thing, you would have to use science to find out if there is an attraction, or if, what's going on. And I feel that if the mass attractors saw an experiment, in their eyes, not how we just, in their understanding, they would be satisfied. So if they didn't have a result, they would have no result. There's no force. I think they're like us. We want to see something, but unfortunately, they've been, indoctrinated this way to, attack us and ask us for demonstrations and not give a demonstration themselves. So. Cavendish, for me, if Rumpus, because he's in the chat now, going, we have a paper, the paper. If he were to witness Cavendish in a vacuum and there was zero attraction, what would he say? And even Geo has said, oh gosh, if there was no attraction in that Cavendish, we're screwed, we're done. So that's something I want for the ballers to put together, at least, so they can see for themselves if mass attracts mass. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that I agree.
Spurs.
You're saying
I've dealt with this. Spurs, I've dealt with it.
I know.
It doesn't attract. Do you want to show me where it attracts? Oh, in the balls. So we need to start explaining this device again. We're going around in circles. If you need to observe something that's happening in nature that needs explanation, then you develop a hypothesis with an independent and a dependent variable. The dependent variable is the first thing in this first step. The phenomena itself, that's your dependent variable. You haven't got one. That's the end of this discussion. Now, you can keep saying, oh, well, no, I'll allow them to beg the question that there's a force we need to explain. Where's it demonstrated? In these balls. Look, they're going towards each other. Spurs, you're just allowing them to beg the question, and if it seems at a fundamental level you don't appreciate that.
Could I
if you're saying,
stick a two-penny with things, Spurs?
Yes, please, Adam.
I've been listening to this, guys, and Spurs, respect, mate. I've utmost respect for the challenge you're taking on, but I think Ranty kind of hit it on the head. You've got the ammunition that you're asking for to engage with any reasonable person, but you seem at the moment to be trying to construct an argument dedicated to the hardcore ballers that aren't really interested in your argument, and it seems you're engaging now in a fruitless task of trying to presuppose all of their nonsense and have a rebuttal for it, when you're never gonna, as Ranty said, you're never gonna convince them. But I think you've got all the arguments you need to engage in real useful conversation with somebody who is actually interested in learning the facts of the situation. I think.
Yeah, not fundies. You're never going to convert fundies. What Adam's saying, Spurs, is you're not going to be able to convert a fundamentalist religious zealot with the winning argument. Even though it's the winning argument, you're not going to convince those people. They are going, no, the winning argument isn't enough. You can't just chop off my argument at the beginning, at the knees, and then say, look, I've cut your argument off the knees. You're begging the question. You're assuming this force, and you haven't got any scientific validity to what you claim is a force that you've created in a device. That's the argument, the beginning and the end of it. Now you say, well, no, because they've still got the device. So what? Let them go to their little temple with their little balls and worship them. Don't worry about it, Spurs. They're zealots.
Adam,
you get a response, don't you?
You're saying, these are trolls because they believe, well, look, Bob and, Bob and co, they also believe mass attracts mass. So it's not just globe earthers we are up against. And it seems pigeonholed. Oh, you're up against these trolls, but no, people of all kinds, all over, believe there is an attraction. Okay, now Bob's one of the biggest flat earthers.
Bob is wrong,
right? And if Bob may be wrong, but what do we do with Bob? Do we just say, Bob, you're a troll?
Okay, no worries. You've got a question. What do we do? Hold on, this is just endless chatter. You've asked a question. Let's give it an answer. What do we do with these people who say they believe there is a force? Yeah? What do we do with them? You say, please, can you show me a force of mass attracting mass? Now, if they point at their religious belief in what Earth is doing, then you go, I'm afraid not. You're going to have to lend some validity to your belief. Now, how do we give validity to our beliefs when we're asserting cause? Oh, science. It's worked up until now. It's progressed humanity through scientific discovery. It's definitely proving cause. If your supposition of cause is correct, when you vary and manipulate it and cause the effect. Now, if they cannot do that, then they have a fundamentalist religious belief in a force they cannot demonstrate. And me, a reasonable person, is not interested in their fundamentalist religious assertion or belief that they cannot validate. If they can validate it, I'll be interested in it. If they can't, it's just their belief, and they are welcome to it. If they assert it as fact, then they are wrong, and I will be the first to say that. They are wrong to assert a belief in a force as a force. It is not, unless you can verify it. But the first thing you're going to have to do is show it me. Observe a phenomena. So, what you do for those persons or people who assert this force that they believe in is ask them to show it to you. Simple.
I like a good Bible quote, but Spurs, I'd maybe just say to you, stop casting your pearls to the swine, mate.
Thank you, Adam.
I've got a question for the Rumpus in chat. 2 questions, Rumpus. If gravity's not a force, where do you get the little g from in your definition for weight? And secondly, and what I mean by that is what experiments is there that's been demonstrating that little g? And secondly, Rumpus, if gravity's not a force and it's the bending of space-time, what's causing tides? I'm done. Take your time, Rumpus. We'll give you 12 months.
Rumpus died a long time ago. Musser put everyone behind the 8 ball when he had that show with Fight the Flat Earth, which Anthony set up wonderfully. The game is over. The game is over, has been over, and now it's just...
Rumpus is saying that gravity is a force in our 3-dimensional world. Well, George Musa says that gravity is not a force, but Rumpus can think of it as a force. Well, everybody else doesn't think of it as a force, Rumpus. So in our 3-dimensional world, it is not a force. So what's causing tides?
Someone correct me if I'm wrong in my perception here. How could 50th of 1, whatever that equation is, 50 million to 1, as attributed to the gravity's force? How could that little amount, 1 out of 50 million ones, how could that do all the things they say it does?
Anthony, you're poisoning this panel. So you've got 10th man to now beg the question. Poison.
Well, my point is this, Nathan.
50 millionth of an assumed force that these fundy zealots need. 50 millionth
right,
of that.
Let's see that first. Let me finish where I was going. So they made up a mathematical equation of bending of space-time, the concept, because that one doesn't work. The first one doesn't work. So they went to the bending of space-time, threw Newton under the bus, and Newton said he didn't even believe it. They've lost.
Yeah, can I just read what Rumpus has put? He says, you can measure little g by simply measuring how quickly something accelerates downwards. Well, that isn't what little g is, though, is it, Rumpus? Because it's a 50 millionth of the object that's accelerating downwards that we should be measuring. And I'd like to see where that measurement was done in scientific method, please. And then he says, Musa agrees with you. He doesn't. Musa is literally saying the opposite of you, Rumpus. He was referring to the behavior in the four-dimensional world where mass bends space-time. In that environment, gravity is not a force. It's not a force in our environment either, Rumpus. Come on, stop being a moron.
While they claim mathematically as a description to bend a concept, in reality, we don't have space-time. That's not something that you can bend. It's a concept. So if you're going to claim a concept gives rise to a non-force force that we can think of as a force even though it's not a force, then you're just a double-speaking zealot. But we already know that Mr. Air is not the atmosphere.
Good
Air
day.
is not the atmosphere.
It's a good day for flat Earth. They've lost at every point. Now they're making even more things up about the stuff they already made up.
Is there nobody in the Discord chat that wants to actually say something? I mean, there's all the Globers in there, surely.
Can I say something to Spurs real fast before?
No,
Dorothy? Spurs, if you're really hung up on the Cavendish, what I would recommend, honestly, is doing it yourself and seeing how ridiculous it is. And that right there will prove to you that it's man-made, that it's easily moved, and it's impossible to get the torsion bar from stopping complete movement 100%. It's not possible.
Now that we've got quite a lot of people watching, I'd like to take this opportunity to correct a common misrepresentation of me by people like the Rumpus. And he does this all the time, and he knows that he's lying. So I'm going to Rumpus misrepresents me with what I said in my Cavendish video. And this is it on screen, Nathan, if you wouldn't mind presenting my screen.
Yep.
So I'm just going to play this slowly, and I'm going to talk through it with what it actually says, because basically Rumpus is telling people lies, and it's not acceptable. It's not okay to misrepresent people, Rumpus. You're doing what Sean Hufford does. I put in the video, the Cavendish experiment was not an experiment because there was no manipulation of gravity. Nobody can manipulate gravity to prove it within science. Even if it did exist, you guys accept that it's a 50 million to 1 chance. Now, this is the bit that Rumpus attacks me on because I put the word chance here. But look what I also said. Smiley face. Look, disclaimer. Big letters. I realize that this isn't technically probability. It's the ratio of how much would be needed to be. It's the ratio of how much would be needed to be varied, but no more. And that number is just laughable. So let's not misrepresent me, Rumpus. Let's get it correct. I realize that it's not a ratio, a probability. I expressly disclaimed it, Rumpus. I realize the point I'm making is remoteness, not that it's a probability. I'm just using it to demonstrate the point of remoteness. So let's not misrepresent me anymore, please, Rumpus.
You're asking a double-speaking fundamentalist religious zealot not to misrepresent you when his entire worldview is based on double-speak and misrepresentations of reality based on mathematics and reification. Yeah, good luck with that.
No, I'm not actually. Yes, superficially, that does look like what I'm doing. What I'm actually doing is appealing to your audience, Nathan, that Rumpus is a dishonest, misrepresentative sack of poo, because I did not say that it was a chance. I was using the point to make the point that it was remoteness. And I gave a massive disclaimer under it saying that I realize it's not a chance or a probability. I realize it's a ratio. But my point is that it's 50 million of the object falling through the air. That's the thing that you're supposed to be measuring, a 50 millionth of that object. Not the object falling through the air, the 50 millionth of it. That's supposed to be the gravity bit. That's the bit you need to wiggle. That's the bit you need to prove. The 50 millionth of the object falling through the air.
When you beg the question of a force.
Yeah. Utter nonsense, Rumpus.
I
still
asked
want to know
Rome
what's causing the tides, though, Rumpus. If gravity's not a force, and we know that it's not a force because Musa told us very clearly. Oh, and by the way, Rumpus said earlier on, he says, He wasn't very clear. Musa wasn't very clear. Yeah, he was. Everybody understands it. If gravity is not a force, and even if it is 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional, bendy space-time, what's causing tides? Because just because you can measure it as a force doesn't make it a force, Rumpus.
If Right the Hand if you want to drop me an email, Right the Hand, I'll get you, or drop me a line on Skype. I'll get into one of the Skype conversations, like masturbators.
Nathan,
unless one of you has already got Right the Hand on Skype.
Not really.
Does he want to come on?
I could add him in.
Does he want to come on?
Oh, hold on. Physics, have you got Right the Hand on your Skype already?
I have him on Skype. I have my Google Hangouts. I can invite him to Google if you like.
No, if you can just add him into Master B. Can you do that? Are you in Master B chat?
I'll add him to Master B then.
Perfect. Add him into Master B. That'd be perfect.
Acknowledged.
Thank you very much, Physics.
Nathan, would you put me back on screen again, please? I'm sorry.
I can.
So Rumpus's last comment was...
Hold on. Chris has been trying to get something in for a few seconds. Go ahead, Chris.
No, sorry. I was just going to say, Anthony, one more thing you can add to this is there's no natural observation for Cavendish. There's never been lateral movement of any two objects due to supposed gravity ever.
So the Rumpus's last comment was, you called it a chance, you utter moron. The words are there in front of you. Literally, it's in the text. Let's just see what it says. Even if it did exist, you guys accept a 50 million to 1 chance. That was because I compared it to the lottery earlier on. However, Rumpus, look, in big, massive letters, the word disclaimer comes up next. I realize this isn't technically probability. It's the ratio of how much would be needed to be varied. So let's be clear, Rumpus. Let's not cherry pick the first bit and ignore the second bit. Let's apply both of them in context. 50 million to 1 as a probability or as a ratio is pretty small, isn't it, Rumpus? That's my point. Remoteness. Not probability, not ratio, remoteness. Yeah, you don't understand remoteness because you're dishonest.
Okay. I know you're going to want to endlessly argue with Rumpus, but Chris's point is 1,000,000 times better. No offense, Anthony. Can you repeat what you said, Chris? Thank you for presenting that, and I'm sure poking Rumpus is great fun and all, but Chris made it perfectly clear the point I've been trying to make to Chemo for the last 2 days.
Well, basically, Anthony said there's no independent variable, which is true because you can't manipulate gravity, but there's no natural observation to begin with. So there's nowhere in nature that I've come across or had anyone else show me where two objects attract each other laterally meaning side to side, not up and down. All attractive motion is apparently up and down from what I've come across. But Cavendish is a lateral movement of objects, but we don't see that anywhere in nature, and it's not possible. Like again, mountains aren't attracting cars. Like you could put a little toy car next to a mountain, it won't attract it. You could put a Jeep next to a mountain and it won't attract it. There's no side to side or lateral movement in nature ever.
Or to put it more succinctly, mass does not attract mass.
That too.
Yeah.
Well, it does it sideways. I mean, yeah, if they're going to demonstrate, gravity, they need to demonstrate it attracting downwards, not sideways, surely.
Well, they need to show the phenomena of mass attracting mass, as opposed to them picking something up and dropping it.
This is where they're hijacking equilibrium and disequilibrium and guising it as gravity.
Yeah, exactly. They're begging the question of this force, and then they force disequilibrium, and then ignore the preceding motion that got it there, and then ask you to explain from there on in what's occurring.
The other thing is I want to preach a little bit about my last 3-4 videos have all been like actual attempts at trying to demonstrate my point that I believe is true, which is that relative density, when in a state of disequilibrium, is a force, according to at least F equals ma. Because if you have an accelerating mass, in other words, movement, Newton states that makes it a force. Now, not that I even agree with that point, but that's what their science or their mechanical Newtonian principles for movement demands. Let me just be clear, I don't agree with these. Anyway, I showed that if you vary the density in some way, and what I mean when I say density, I don't just mean the amount of particulates in a given volume. If you manipulate the volume or the mass, then if you create a disequilibrium for whatever magical reason, creation or otherwise, movement happens. I don't know why it does it, but I know that it does it, and I demonstrated it. So it's not okay to ignore the fact that relative density disequilibrium does cause movement. It is the cause. I don't care what went on in the conical flask in terms of the chemistry that actually went on. I don't care whether the hydrogen atoms exploded with the magnesium atoms. I don't care about any of that. We can observe that there was a change in pressure because the syringe moved. And we can observe that we manipulated that density of the inside the flask by burning something. It doesn't matter what happens inside that flask. If it creates a movement of the piston, that's the visualization of the change in pressure. That the mere fact that it changes or it moves the piston means that there's a force there. Don't know why, just is. So let's not argue about whether or not relative density is a force or not. It clearly is by their own science. And nobody has been able to come up with anything credible against it because it did manipulate the density. The manipulation was done by doing something in the flask. So if anybody can debunk it, again, let's see what's going on there causing the movement of the syringe, because it is the thing that we manipulate in scientific method. And the ballers don't like it because we can show that the cherry tomato moves because of relative density disequilibrium. No force required.
Yeah.
Rumper says that you're inferring
they were
an incorrect
excellent demonstrations.
Yeah. I mean, if they're wrong, they're wrong. But let's get some real
What do you mean
science
wrong?
for why they're wrong.
Hold on. What do you mean wrong? They are what they are. They're just they are what they are, which is a demonstration.
Yeah. Rumpus says that I'm inferring an incorrect cause. No, the cause, Rumpus, the presumed cause in scientific method is the thing that you manipulate. And we did manipulate something in that flask.
Doesn't
so
matter.
whatever goes on inside the flask, not really that
sorry
bothered.
to do this to you. You're falling into this trap, right? So, what's the observed phenomena again, Anthony?
Some things appear to move in all by themselves if we manipulate. Like some things sink, some things float.
Whoa. If we manipulate,
suspend.
if things appear what? Sorry?
Some things sink, some things float, some things suspend within the medium. That's the observed phenomena.
Shout out to Retro Bill for the super chat. He says, Muppet tards keep pushing gravity, but we are not, quote unquote, falling for it. Thank you very much for the super chat, Retro Bill.
I was just about to say that, Nathan. The phenomenon in his experiment, right? So he caused this phenomena that he's describing.
Well, actually, no, Spurs. No, he has just he's just pummeled me, Spurs. That's why I shut up and read a super chat and went quiet. But you feel free to take up the slack that I've just been pummeled on if you want to.
I want to know. He has an experiment. He observes a phenomena, but according to the method, this is not a natural phenomena here. We don't see what he's observed in nature.
Yeah,
right?
we do.
But for me,
hold on, Spurs. Hold on. Don't just declare we don't observe it in nature when that's literally how he's pummeled me.
Spurs, what Nathan means is that maybe you missed what I said when I said that some things appear to float, some things appear to sink, some things appear to rise. That's the observed phenomena.
Okay, so what's next? Some things appear to float, some things appear to fall.
Well, the thing is, when we have the density tower and we have the cherry sat in the middle, the argument is that it's that buoyancy is causing it because of gravity when it moves. The egg was displaced in my egg experiment because apparently, according to these morons, that gravity caused it because the buoyant effect relies on gravity and we can prove it with maths. Well, that's not what scientific method states. Scientific method states that it's the wiggling of the independent variable that proves the cause and effect relationship, regardless of any maths. So that's not true. But what it proves is that if gravity was the cause in the egg experiment, then that's the thing that's got to be manipulated in scientific method. Gravity was not manipulated. the density of the medium was manipulated, and scientific method states that that's your presumed cause, and when you wiggle it, that you prove the cause and effect relationship. And that's what happened. But Rumpus thinks that I've somehow confused correlation with causation. And I would say, no, Rumpus, I complied with scientific method. I win, you lose. Sorry. Why don't you join the panel, Rumpus, and let's have the discussion about independent variables. I'd love to hear how you're going to explain in a way how weight is a force when we know that it's not actually, gravity is not a force anymore at all.
Really, you want 20 minutes of Rumpus explaining something he can't demonstrate?
Well, no, just beg the question. All that will happen is he'll immediately arrive, make a little disclaimer that begs the question, and he'll go from there. That's all they can do. Not like we haven't experienced the Rumpus before.
This is what I was saying, Nathan, yesterday. They want to talk about it, whereas you're saying, I don't want to talk about it. I just want you to demonstrate it.
That's not what I said.
This is what I was saying, what they want to do. They want to socialize about these begging the question points, right?
Right, they want to beg the question. I understand that. So what would typically happen is Rumpus would arrive. He'd immediately disclaim that he's going to beg the question of a force. Then he'll start to describe how he's measuring the assumption of a force. Now, in that process, I will jump in and go, you've begged the question. The moment he does it, yeah? Then he'll cry foul for about 25 minutes that I'm censoring reality as I point out the rebuttal to his assertion, where he begs the question. That's all that ever happens. Nothing ever changes in that regard. You want to let them beg the question. What you want, Spurs, is to let them beg the question, let them give their 20-minute explanation within the begging the question fallacy, and then address that. And I just say no. I'm not going to allow you to make the question.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but that's what I was pointing out yesterday, is why are they here? Why do they do this? And they want to...
Not again. You had the whole show yesterday. Your real desire, Spurs. I love your empathy.
Spurs, I regularly give elaborate lectures on the psychology of these ballers and how it works. You should know why they do what they do.
Yeah,
allow me to finish, please. Spurs, your empathy is A+, but without wisdom, you're misappropriating it. What I've seen is that you really want to have the ability to have crazy people so that you could practice your psychology on them, how you could help them. You have the patience of a turtle, but you're not helping them because you let them beg the question, and their craziness gets even stronger. So you want to offer therapy when you should be offering truth.
And with that, I'll say if you are watching this on the Nathan Oakley premiering stream, then stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. However, if you're watching this live on Nathan Oakley 1980, unfortunately, this is where we bid you farewell. A huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of you who smashed the super chat, liked, commented, shared, subscribed, and all that good stuff. And of course, a massive thank you to all of today's debating panel for making this debate possible. If you need to keep yourself occupied after this stream is over, then go to nathanoakley.com and check out the Flat Earth Debate Forum, which I strongly advise you all join to keep up to date with the community debate. I've been Nathan Oakley. Stay tuned if you're watching on the premiering stream, and I'll see you all in the next video.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Shout out to Earth is Seriously Flat. Globe mentality is under attack by FE logic. Another big shout out to Earth is Seriously Flat.